Hello everybody, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to Tarot de Marseille on Earth. This is the series where I go through my experiences and sort of guide you in a way so you have some company with learning Tarot de Marseille with Tom Benjamin's book, Tarot on Earth. Full disclosure, I have finished this work at this point and I'm guiding you through week by week, so the pacing might not match up with exactly where you're at, and that's totally fine. I want you to follow this at your own pace. So remember, if you are not where I am yet as of watching this video right here, go to the previous one and either rewatch it if it's been a break for you since you've been working on this, or just pause and come back to this video when you are ready to tackle the next section. So last week I gave us the entire part 3 basically, which is the trumps. So we talked about the courts last week in that whole section and what we'd accomplished there and what the experiences were like. If you have finished that section and have now finished the trumps, then you're in the right place. So this is what I assigned last week, was all of section 3 on the trumps. So this went from basically page, just so you know where we're at, from page 163 through to page 209, which was a lot. And the exercises in here were time-consuming, lengthy exercises. So I expect that this has probably been more than a week for you by the time you're watching this video. But if not, go you, because you've gotten a lot done. That being said, as I mentioned in the previous video, once we moved away from the pips in this particular book, I started to feel that pull into more of my own way of approaching this information and merging sort of what I learned from the first bits of this book in with my current practice and the way that I approach the tarot. And I was trying to find that sort of sweet spot. So the courts and the trumps for me, when we got here, has been more difficult, and it hasn't been as free-flowing because I did need to sort of sift the information that I was reading through my own personal lens to find a result that really, really worked for me. So my experience working through the trumps has been kind of interesting, and I kind of want to go exercise by exercise and tell you how I did. Firstly, one of the very first exercises here is to just connect your archetypes of the trump with real life. And so this was a very, I feel like this exercise, I made a note here basically that this exercise didn't gel for me, partly because I'm already doing this in a different way, this as well as the next exercise. So 7.1 was basically all about, I'm just going to read this, actually, this little section here. So the idea was to just explore the trumps. Now I did flip through the trumps here and think about them, which I think was really what this was asking us to do. I think some people might have actually done some journaling, but one of the other things here involved people watching and sort of looking for the trumps in the interactions of other people. And that was tricky for me because while I love people watching, I'm sort of an optimistic people watcher. When I go out people watching, or when I'm in a place where I find myself people watching, I sort of notice the little happy moments, which is a very light-sided view of the trumps if I was looking for them. So I didn't really do this exercise the way that it was described. I did flip through the trumps. I did think about the different ways that those show up for people. And so for me, it was a mental exercise. I didn't go out into the world and do the people watching bit, and I didn't do a whole lot of journaling. But I do think it's useful to pay attention to where the trumps show up in our lives. And this sort of brings us to exercise 7.2, which is literally about applying the trumps to your own life, to people in your life, and to experiences that you've had. Now, I literally wrote in my book here in this exercise, tarot memoirs, because as some of you know, I am running a series on my channel concurrently with this one called Tarot Memoirs, where I am literally going through the major arcana and then the minor arcana as well, and looking at each trump and how it compare, like what the definition of that trump is, like how I interpret that trump, and then how that shows up for me in my life, how it has shown up for me. And I usually share a couple of like ways it shows up in an ongoing basis, in light and in shadow, and then I also usually share one really potent, fairly potent for me memory of when that trump's energy has been present for me. So I didn't do this because I'm already doing it, and I will tell you from doing the Tarot Memoirs series that this is a hefty exercise, and he knows it. He does talk about that here, and he says, like, I understand if you're going to work on this while you work through the rest of the book, but this was a pass for me because I'm already doing this and I'm already putting the work into it. So I didn't want to like put all those notes in here when I'm keeping them elsewhere and I'm doing the videos. So if you are curious about how I have been doing this for me, then do check out my Tarot Memoir series. It goes up on my channel every Sunday, and I'm at the time of this video, I'm pre-filming this, so I'm not entirely sure where I'm at, but I'm probably nearing the tower by now, if I'm not there yet, but somewhere around there, so starting to get into the difficult cards. But anyway, I've definitely done a whole bunch already, so check that out and you can see how I approached it. I would be curious to hear from you guys if any of you did this exercise or started to do this exercise, and if anything really useful came about for you through doing that, because I certainly know that in doing my Tarot Memoirs has been really enlightening and has completely changed my relationship with a lot of the major arcana or the trump cards. So I think it's a really, really useful thing to do. It's just that I'm already doing it, so I didn't do it in here. Moving on from there, looking at the trumps, the next thing he has us do, let me see if I can find the next activity here. Where does it go? There we go. Ah, yes, connecting the dots. So this is where we are actually connecting trumps to simpler questions. And I went very purely on my gut, on my intuition, and on my current relationship with the major arcana or with the trump cards to answer these. And my answers are actually pretty short and sweet. So I went through this whole exercise and found like really straightforward, poignant answers. And what he does in this section is he basically gives you like a card that you've drawn and what the question was, and then you can write in your answer here. And I'm writing all over this book because to me this is a workbook, like it's a lesson book. It's meant to be like worked through and gritty and whatever. And I will find it interesting, I think, to look back later if I can read my handwriting later and actually compare like where I'm at now, or at that point I should say, with where I was at when I did this book. So definitely enjoying writing all over my book. And that was useful to me to actually get back into practical stuff. But to be honest, this feels a little repetitive because I've done this work with other tarot books and with other personal like growth stuff through the tarot. So I don't think this is something that would make or break this experience for me. I think it's good to get in there, and I think it's a necessary part of the book, especially if you haven't done a lot of this work already. But I think I could take it or leave it, to be honest. I'd be curious what you guys thought, so please do tell me. The other thing that came up was, oh, and he does talk about, oh, and then there's more of these. Oh, that's right. So then we're getting into some more. So exercise 7.4 feels like it's very, oh, that's right. In exercise 7.4, are we drawing our own cards? No. Oh, this was about more being helpful. So giving helpful answers. So not just like, what does it make you think of, but what is the useful information? And I will tell you that, like, here's Tom's, like, sample answer to one of these, and then there's, like, my little ones. So I still was very straightforward, and to me those two exercises actually felt fairly similar, but they were the questions were, like, much less esoteric and deep, and the kind of things we normally associate with the major arcana, which did help me to think about the major arcana in a slightly different way. So, for example, where should I go on vacation? The card was death, and I was like, you should go to the desert. You should go to Vegas. I don't know why, that's what popped in my head. So I kind of had fun with this, but I didn't take it overly seriously, if that makes any sense. And I think that's totally fine. I think the idea was to shake us out of our patterns, maybe, with the arcana and looking at them as if they have to be these really deep, soul-searchy kind of moments. They're not always. Sometimes they're very, like, practical, day-to-day kind of stuff. There was a couple questions here that I just wouldn't have answered, and that's my own personal ethics. I would have either reframed the question, and I know we kind of addressed this earlier with questions and ethics, but there was a question here about what will be the result of my litigation. Like, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not going to tell you what the results of your lawsuit were. That for me just doesn't feel like something I should be doing. So I literally wrote no there. So I was like, no, I'm not going there. And if a client asked me about a legal matter or a health matter, it depends on the context of the question and kind of what they really want to get. Usually if a client, and this is a great segue. If a client asks me a question that I feel I ethically cannot answer in good faith, or I feel like it's a kind of answer that I don't want a client to take seriously because it could cause them harm if they do, or do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I feel like there's questions that come up where I'm not the right person to answer the question as it's asked. I also don't necessarily believe in reframing the question for the client necessarily unless they ask me for that kind of help, or I might offer that kind of help. But typically what I do if a question comes up that just isn't a good mix for what I offer, I'll ask them kind of what they want to get out of it. What are they looking for? Direction? Are they looking for a plan of action? Are they looking to address something in themselves that I can help them to address? And usually if it's a conversation, we can get to the right subject for the reading. So example here is, what will be the result of my litigation? I don't think the question is really intended to get into how is this lawsuit going to turn out, or whatever litigation it might be. It probably has more to do with the relationship with Gary. And so I think that if we look at that and discuss that, then we can come up with an appropriate question. That's probably why he put it in here, is to make us think about this kind of stuff. But I know that his take on ethics isn't exactly the most common take, but ethics is one of those things that you have to define for yourself. And sometimes I think I'm not okay with something, and in a particular context, it makes perfect sense and it feels ethically appropriate for me to do that reading. And other times, it feels like something that should totally feel fine to do, and for some reason that time, that context, that particular situation, ethically I need to have a conversation about how we can reframe and give a reading that's going to be really useful and feel ethically appropriate. So anyways, that just kind of made me think of that, and I know that's a bit of a segue, but I'd be curious to know if you all really jived with all of these questions, or if there are questions that you're like, no, I don't even answer that kind, or I don't see myself going to the tarot for this if you only read for yourself, for example. A lot of these are kind of based on the context of a client coming to you with a really straightforward, linear sort of question, wanting a linear sort of answer. And I mean, I don't know about you, if you've read for friends or if you've read for clients, I find that a lot of times people don't go to the tarot for, at least the people that I've attracted, and that's a big part of it too, right? But I haven't necessarily attracted people who are drawn to the tarot to answer these sort of what Tom would call banal questions, right? It just hasn't been my experience. So I muddled my way through this, and I enjoyed the way that it stretched my brain in a new way, and I think that was useful, but it wasn't my favorite exercise either. And then the next bit is where he explains how he got there in these different questions and sort of what he took from his the card draws and how he would have answered the question in that section, which is always interesting to read somebody else's perspectives, because sometimes it shakes you up and makes you think of things a little differently. And then finally we get into, I think this is finally, 7.6, we do some sample readings where we pull 3 cards. I like 3-card readings. 3-card readings work for me a lot better than 9-card readings do in the way that they're demonstrated in this book. So I had some fun going through those 3-card readings, and he did throw in a couple more like spiritual questions, so that was kind of fun. And that brings us to the end of lesson 7. So hopefully you are hanging in there, because now that we are through the quartz and the majors, there's just a bit more to go, and I know you can do this, and we'll see it through together. So going into next week, and again, week is kind of a misnomer. You are welcome to watch the next video whenever you're ready to watch it. So it might not be next week. It might be in like 3 weeks, and that's totally fine. But before you watch the next video, please read interlude number 4 on being wrong. And let's tackle part 3, which is all about visual language, and take that all the way through. So we're going to read page 210 through 251, and I will see you all in my next video. Take care, y'all. Bye.